You're thinking of starting a carnivore diet without red meat? What? Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name is Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. So as you can tell by the thumbnail of this video, I've lost over 160 pounds doing the carnivore diet. And I've done it with a variety of different ways of doing carnivore. Now, the one thing that's usually almost always been a staple in my carnivore diet, is an abundance of red meat. I find it's the most satiating meat to eat. Now, lots of different carnivores, depending maybe on their the country they live in, really, it might depend on where they're living and what food is accessible. That might determine how much of what type of food they get. Maybe they're in a part of the country where seafood is more abundant, or maybe they're in a part of the country where red meat just isn't available. So yeah, it's possible to do. If you have the option, I would highly recommend doing your carnivore diet with a substantial amount of red meat. For me, I find, and a lot of other carnivores find this too, it's the most satiating meat out there. Probably because it's the most nutrient-dense food out there, plus the fact that it usually has more fat marbled in it, depending on the protein source or where you're getting it from. I usually try and stay away from lean cuts of red meat. I find any lean cuts for too many days in a row, I start to go into protein poisoning, and that's something you'd have to watch out for. Now, it's not like you're necessarily going to die anytime soon from that, because common sense will prevent you from getting that far into it that it'll cause any serious damage. But what happens is some symptoms of protein poisoning are your lack of sleep, you get brain fog, you just don't feel good, your energy's off. There's different things to watch out for with protein poisoning. And typically that means you're just getting too much protein and, more importantly, not enough fat. Now, I feel you can have all the protein in the world that you want as long as you're getting enough fat with it. There was a while there where I was doing over 6 pounds of meat a day on a carnivore diet. And that was lean ground beef. I was getting about 6,000 calories a day. And there was a lot of fat in there, but there was also a lot of protein. Now, that didn't bother me. That was something like 600 grams of protein in a day. I wasn't dealing with protein poisoning or rabbit starvation, but I was getting enough fat in there to balance that out. So I don't think that protein poisoning is so much about an abundance of protein as a lack of fat. You want to make sure whatever meat you're going to settle on, if you ever were to decide to cut red meat out of your carnivore diet, that you want to make sure you're getting enough fat outside of there. So bacon, right off the bat, is a really good source of nice fatty meat. I could honestly do a strict bacon diet. In fact, one day I might try that for an extended window of time. Just bacon all day, every day. Dehydrated, fried, well done, little medium. You know, there's lots of different ways you can make bacon, and boy, is it fun. The only reason why I don't have bacon more often is not because it's a high fat content. I find it really satiating, but because of the salt, it's easy to overindulge. But more than that, I don't know if it's because it's a cured meat or because it's just the salt in general. But like I've mentioned in lots of other videos, I seem to get like a psoriasis of some kind on my nose and on my forehead if I have too much of that. So yeah, there are some times where you can have other foods that are fatty on a carnivore diet that will be okay for you to get by for a while, but you'll just find over time red meat is just a comfortable meat for you to eat day in, day out. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would you want to even try a carnivore diet without red meat? Keep in mind, even if you're cutting out cow, you can still have lamb, bison. There's lots of different ruminant animals out there that you can still have that are still classified as red meat. I think deer is technically red meat. I'm not positive about that. If anyone out there knows that fact, please leave a comment in the section below. I really appreciate it. Back to the point, red meat just has a naturally wide selection of fats to protein ratio depending on the cut you get. So on top of that, if you want to get more fat in your carnivore diet, getting fat trimmings from your local butcher are a great way to go to make sure you're getting enough fat in your diet. But for some reason, maybe you're concerned that that's a fat worthy of concern for you, I highly recommend doing more research. Go to Dr. Ken Berry's channel about that. And there's a carnivore doctor out there who's a cardiologist. I forget his name, but I believe he was on Dr. Berry's channel not long ago, and you could get more information about that from him. He's a cardiologist, and he highly recommends a carnivore diet. You want to keep in mind, lots of the information we've been fed through the years has proven to be wrong based on faulty science. Faulty science that was never proven, it was only a theory. So that goes back to Dr. Ansel Keys. You can look him up on Google. You can buy lots of books about that guy. He was a shyster. He was a horrible doctor out there who took payoffs to recommend that sugar was not the culprit, but fat was. Carbohydrates were good, fat was bad, specifically saturated fat, when really you see all these people thriving on a carnivore diet and they're really eating a high saturated fat diet. So unfortunately, when it comes to nutritional science, it's not very reliable. And what I mean by that is the vast majority of nutritional science out there is sort of bogus, or really they don't really know much past any good quality studies have only been done for typically weeks at a time. So when it comes to science proving or disproving something like carnivore, there's not much science out there really either way, because the science that disproves carnivore has traditionally been a really poor quality science that still has carbohydrates in the diet. So you can't blame meat for lots of the problems that carbohydrates might be causing. And any studies done specifically on carnivore, well, there's not too many out there. But what is out there is pretty good. But if you were to cut red meat out of your diet, I'd really try and make sure you're getting as much fatty meat as possible to compensate. So if you're leaning towards chicken, make sure to have the skin on it. Now you have to watch where the chicken's being fed, because you don't want too many omega-6s in there. And you have to watch out for that just because of the type of food that they're typically being fed. So chicken on its own is okay, but too much chicken consistently might cause some problems. Now, if you're eating wild game, that's a different topic, but you're still not going to be able to get enough fat probably in your diet, because there's just not much fat in wild game. So I would offset that with omega-3 fatty acids through fish oils. So you can always make sure to try and get as much fish as you can to compensate for the fact that you might not be getting enough fat through your diet if you're cutting red meat out. The reason why I bring this topic up to begin with is I think there's some people out there that are hesitant still with red meat because of all the training we've had through the years that's gone against that. And again, I just highly recommend researching Dr. Ansel Keys. There's a great book out there called The Big Fat Surprise. I highly recommend you read that book. I'm going to do a review on it one day. I've read it a few times through the years. I really enjoy it. It's one of my go-to books I enjoy reading or listening to every now and then, probably about once a year or every year and a half. So if you are going to cut out red meat or limit it in your carnivore diet, make sure you're taking some supplements just to make sure you're getting enough variety as far as supplements and minerals go, okay? So we want to make sure that you're topped off all the time. And because red meat is such a nutrient-dense food, we want to make sure, since you're cutting back on that, that you're getting it from other sources. But typically the beauty of carnivore is you don't have to worry about getting anything from those other sources unless you're trying to correct some autoimmune disorder or some digestive problems so that it can help boost along any of the healing benefits you're going through on a carnivore diet. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate it.